Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. We're continuing with our 2022 season previews as we take a look at the Texas A&M Aggies. Dill, this is one of the more intriguing teams heading into 2022 simply because how talented this team is across the board with one question mark, and that is who is going to be playing quarterback. Dill, what is your lean here?
My inclination is it's going to be Max Johnson. I think he was really good at LSU.
Yes.
I don't really get why he wasn't just given the keys to the car and let him go. And they were always subbing him in and out with everyone else. But honestly, he was far and away the best quarterback, and in my opinion, played really good football in an LSU offense that was kind of chaotic, couldn't block, had a lot of injuries, and was obviously being coached quite poorly.
In my mind, Jimbo Fisher should be looking at who is the most reliable quarterback we have. This is way too talented of a roster to go with a question mark at quarterback. Haynes King played, 2-3 games before he got hurt. Looked okay, but not great. And then you have the young true freshman 5-star Connor Wiggum. Who are you going to give him the keys to a car of such a loaded roster? I'd rather go with the veteran Max Johnson, who's a guy that has shown that he can play high-level SEC football in an offense that you noted kind of sucked last year. When Kayshon Boutte went out, they couldn't run the football. They didn't have developed playmakers on the outside, and he still looked pretty good. He still brings that athleticism that Jimbo Fisher obviously looks for. And quite frankly, it can't get any worse than Zach Calzada last year.
Yeah, he really struggled, and the pieces around him were really pretty solid, top to bottom, and he just could never kind of make it happen. And
everything in that, it was so frustrating because he does have such a good arm, but everything, when you go and watch that offense back, everything looks so hard for Texas A&M. Like just simple completions, Zach Calzada was missing. Really, really immobile when he had to make plays outside of the pocket. Everything looked hard on that offense.
You've been waiting almost 5 years for Jimbo Fisher to have an offense that looks like it's weird. A guy of Jimbo's ilk who has been a really good offensive coach, and you're just waiting for that quarterback, just like so many teams in college football. Michigan was in that boat.
Yeah.
LSU was in that boat for forever. And you're just waiting for your guy. And they are cranking up in recruiting, and we'll see if they can kind of find it, because elsewise this team's good.
Jimbo Fisher's kryptonite since he's been at Texas A&M has been, how can you find explosive passing? Just some sort of resemblance of an explosive passing. I'm not saying you have to be top 20 in explosive passing, but the last 2 years being outside of the top 100, abysmal, really, really bad. They cannot find explosive plays, and that's not to say that the wide receiver talent hasn't been good. They bring in very, very good offensive talent. They bring in fast guys. They just haven't really been able to put it together. That being said, this is probably the most talented we've seen this Texas A&M pass catcher unit. They did a very, very good job in the recruiting classes. And Aeneas Smith has the DUI, possession of a gun, possession of marijuana. We don't know how many games he's going to play. That being said, there's some guys that, and that's a big loss. I don't mean to underscore that.
It really is, because he was their best by far last year.
You have two guys in Chase Lane, Jalen Preston, who've played a lot of football for you. They're kind of the veterans, but you got to look towards kind of the young, up-and-coming group. It's got to be headlined by Evan Stewart. He was a top 10 player nationally in the 2022 class. Was really the only wide receiver that I thought looked that good in the spring game, and he's a guy that's going to be ready to play week one.
And let's be honest, if you're going to be young at one position and young and talented at that, it's probably wide receiver, because you kind of see that's a position that these guys, when they're good players like an Evan Stewart ilk, they come in and play right away, and they play really good football. It just doesn't take as long as the D lineman or sometimes the O lineman.
Quarterback, defensive line, and offensive line is by far the hardest position to come in as an 18-year-old and be dominant at the college level. Another guy I throw in there, Moose Muhammad, from everything I've been reading about spring ball, looks like he could be a guy that fills in for Aeneas Smith's shoes, as Aeneas Smith might have to sit out some time. Chris Marshall is a longer receiver who I also think can stretch the field vertically. They have guys. It's just they got to put it together. And looking at the running back room, Isaiah Spiller was good. I was never that high on Isaiah Spiller.
H-Lane is better than Isaiah Spiller. Yes. I genuinely think, I wish he even touched the ball more. Just it seems like a much more explosive athlete. In both, I think what Isaiah Spiller did really well was pick through holes, had good vision, did kind of play
Ran the
position
ball a little harder than Devin Chain too.
but he's nowhere near the athlete, nowhere near as explosive as AJ.
And again, with Texas A&M is on the quest to hit explosive plays on offense, you are gonna have more explosive plays the more times Devin Chain touches the football. He legit is one of the fastest players in college football, verified college track time. My question mark for him is, can he carry the ball 20, 25 times like kind of Isaiah Spiller can? If he can, I still think he'll get 12, 15 touches a game. But you do have guys like LJ Johnson Jr., Amari Daniels, LJ Johnson Jr. being a guy who was a top 50 recruit in and of himself. So you have guys that can kind of spell a chain, but Devin Chain, I think, is going to be the guy that's going to provide some explosive plays in an offensive.
You want to get him in different positions. Like you want to be able to throw him the ball. You want to be able to have him coming out of the backfield because that's where he was thriving last year. He didn't carry the ball a ton. I mean, he carried it plenty to know how good he is. But obviously a guy who was one of their bigger playmakers in terms of catching the football, making those 30-plus yard plays.
Yep, 130 carries for 910 yards. He averaged 7 yards a carry on 130 carries. That's not some small sample size. That is bona fide explosive numbers. An offensive line that I think can be just as good. You obviously lose a guy like Kenyon Green, a very, very good football player for Texas A&M. Kind of played all over the offensive line. But you have some guys, Bryce Foster, really, really good as a freshman. Ruben Fader, I think you say Ruben Fader. He was a freshman All-American. They've recruited the offensive line really well. A guy that I think is kind of flying on the radar. They hired Steve Alduzio from BC and Colorado State as their offensive line coach. I love that idea of taking a guy who has head coach experience and saying, hey, you're now into like Doug Marrone at Alabama. I think it really worked out for them. I think this offensive line is going to be a good group. The offense should be good. The big question mark is the quarterback.
I mean, if they give, I don't know. My thing is like give Max Johnson a shot. Let him like play a whole year and just let it rip because like, you saw like really good football at times for LSU. It's just he never really was given a fair shake. I didn't think.
Yeah, and on the defense, it's a legit embarrassment of riches. And it's in my mind, we'll start on the defensive line. The position group on defense that I value the most at the college level is you look at some of the elite defenses we saw last year and then years past. Why are they so good? They have a dominant defensive line that can stop the run, but it also can stop the pass because they just get after the passer. Texas A&M has a laundry list of 4 or 5 bona fide blue chip 5-star players that can make an impact. Now you lose DeMarvin Leal, you lose Michael Clemens, you lose Jaden Peavy. Guys that I liked, like they were all went to the NFL, all very good players at the college level. But still, it seems to me like just a numbers game. Like all these 5-stars that they have, some of them are going to be good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You look at it; they're really not returning any production from last year. But you got a ton of sophomores, a ton of freshmen, just really young, ultra talented players like. Walter Nolan's probably going to play this year.
He has to.
Just if you looked at him, you're like, yeah, that guy could be playing college ball as probably a junior in high school. So it's you got guys of that stature. I just think you're right. You'll be able to put together 6 to 8 of them who can play at a high level.
It's a numbers game. Like some of these guys, even if some of them can't step up year one, some of them are gonna. Walter Nolan, we mentioned, it's hard for guys on the defensive line, offensive line as 18-year-olds to come in and play good college football.
Giants.
Yeah, Walter Nolan's not going to have a problem playing college football with his body. Shamar Turner's another guy that you could definitely throw and say he's going to be able to play year one. 2 guys who are top 10 recruits in the country. McKinley Jackson's a guy who's played in like flash when I'm watching the Marvin Leal film. Like this dude is good. I think he's going to put it together. And then Adalia, I don't think I'm saying his name right. He, I believe, was the guy that really caught my eye in the spring game. Again, an embarrassment of riches, and I'm not even mentioning a guy like LeBus Overton, who is also a top 20 guy in the country. Like it's disgustingly talented group. And you look at the linebacker room, and you lose a guy like Aaron Hansford, who led the team in tackles last year, 6-year senior. To be quite frank, and I want to be respectful, these younger linebackers are going to be better.
That number 45 is legit. He's going to be
He's a freak athlete.
a high pick as a junior.
Yep. Oh,
like,
yeah.
You watched him, and I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
see maybe enough to what I wanted, but you saw him flying around, making a ton of plays. Looks like he's got the size even as a freshman. I'm super excited to see what he can blossom into because he just looked awesome.
It was funny. I was reading a little bit on Texas A&M in the spring, like kind of getting to know some of the younger guys we haven't seen play a ton. And he was a guy that I read so much about, Adrian Cooper. He's going to be a stud. And everybody seems to like him. I'm happy that you picked him out too. Andre White's also, he's played a lot of football.
A really solid older guy. I think those two together are just going to be a good running mates.
Yeah, and as good as Aaron Hasford was for them, he just was capped athletically. I mean, just not the athlete.
Like, he wasn't a pro. He was a really good college linebacker, but like number 45, Adrian, he's gonna be a pro. He's probably gonna be a first rounder if he makes progressions through his sophomore year.
He's really good. Now, we hyped on the defensive line. I think this secondary might be the best unit on this whole team, though. You lose a guy like Leon O'Neal, who obviously is very good. Antonio Johnson is one of my favorite 2023 NFL draft prospects. He's a guy that played a lot of nickel last year. I'm interested to see what they do with him, but he's a guy that's 6'3", 200 pounds, can blitz, can tackle in the box, can stretch the field. He does everything well. You have a guy like Jalen Jones, who I absolutely love, Damani Richardson. It's a bunch of 5-stars, bunch of top 100 recruits that played a lot of football last year, and then they're all coming back. It's really hard to see this team not being good in the second.
Yeah, and it just helps so much. Again, I'm with you on Jalen Jones. I think he's a really, really good corner, a huge corner too. You just see him; he looks gigantic. But the guy, he runs with people. I thought he played really good football. And to me, when you have that guy, you don't really need to worry about a ton on the edge. It really helps your secondary, especially when you have safeties with the talent Texas A&M does.
So I wanna throw up their schedule really quick because it's obviously a hard schedule. Whenever you play Miami cross conference, you're already gonna have a hard schedule at the SEC. You add a team like App State and Miami, like those aren't cakewalk teams, but they should win both those games. You start out with Sam Houston, so whoever's starting at quarterback does get an FCS opponent to kind of get some confidence. Whether it's Haynes King coming back from injury, whether it's Max Johnson in the new system, or whether it's Connor Wigman playing in his first college football game, App State should be a little the same. They're better, but Texas A&M has just better athletes on both sides of the ball. And quite frankly, you can say the same thing about Miami. Miami recruits well, but they're not on the level that Texas A&M is, and they haven't really shown it. Texas A&M has shown that they're one of the best teams in the country. I'd be surprised if that game is within a score. I think Texas A&M will roll that. And then you get into the SEC schedule where you saw Texas A&M struggle with teams like Arkansas just because they couldn't move the football. They could not score consistently. There wasn't a playmaker on the team. If you can fix that problem, there aren't many teams that I think in the SEC can hang with Texas A&M if you have good quarterback play other than Alabama on this roster.
That's honestly the crux of the issue. If you can play a high, you're not even like high level, just be like above average quarterback play.
Yeah.
This is going to be a really, really tough team. I don't think they're going to lose that many games.
The one game that Zach Calzada actually looked good in was Alabama, and they ended up beating Alabama. It was pretty comfortably the second best team in the country. And this Texas A&M team, again, I'm not getting into too many betting talks right now, but if you were to take a future on a team that's really undervalued, I think it's Texas A&M. You look at their roster, one of the best rosters in college football outside of the quarterback where you have a question mark. Now you have Max Johnson, who's very talented. Haynes King, who's talented in his own right and got hurt last year. And then a true freshman in Connor Wigman. Again, the numbers game. One of those guys, they kind of were forced to play Zach Calzada. Like Haynes King got hurt. They didn't really have anybody else. Zach Calzada had to go on. As bad as he was last year, they didn't really have anybody else to go to. Jimbo Fisher goes to the portal and gets Max Johnson, goes to the high school ranks and gets Connor Wigman. And if this team can find a quarterback, they can legitimately be national championship contenders and even sneak in to the college football playoffs with just a loss to Alabama in the regular season.
They were like right on the cusp last year. I mean, at the end of the day, like they were really, really good.
That team could have won a national title, I think, with a decent quarterback. Maybe not Georgia because Georgia didn't have great quarterback play, but that team last year was so good. They just didn't have a core. Zach Calzada was like, I feel like at times, and I have a noodle arm that I could have just been better because he was like painfully bad at times. Guys, that's a review on Texas A&M. Again, this is a team to watch for. They're not getting a ton of talk as like a top 4 team, but I think they're a top 4 team, at least on paper. Definitely keep an eye on Texas A&M, guys. We appreciate you guys checking us out. If you guys do like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate this sport, and we'll talk to y'all later.